So welcome to our first event of 2022. This is a bit of a different event. This is obviously service design Dallas chapter, but we are opening up to be more like North America centric. The topic today is going to be sponsored by Slalom, which has been sponsoring us for quite some time now, as well as Precocity. So this meeting in Zoom is sponsored to you by Precocity, who is allowing us to reach well, it looks like the entire world. We have people coming from just about anywhere in the world, which is wonderful to see as usual. As always, I want to introduce our small core team. So myself, Greg Laclofi from Slalom, Brandon from Precocity, Robin from Capital One, and Brenda from GM Financial. So we are going to be our host today, and we're going to handle the chat. And I want to go over some very basic rules, which are going to be very simple. First of all, this is being recorded. So if you want to have access to this recording later on or share this with your colleagues or peers, it will probably be available tonight or maybe tomorrow morning, depending on how much we go through today. If you also want to look at the past 20 or 30 other guests we've had in the past, feel free to go ahead and take a look at those. We have some wonderful speakers over the past couple of years who've joined us and shared their wisdom around service design. As we were just discussing earlier, if you have any question for our speakers, feel free to use the Zoom chat window. And as Brenda was mentioning, just make sure that there is quite a bit of activity in the chat room where you guys can talk to each other, which we highly recommend. But if you have a specific question for the speakers, please make it obvious to us, because there's going to be hundreds of them. So make it obvious to us that we can actually just ask the speakers. Usually we wait until the end of the speaker to ask them the questions, like in 45 minutes or so, because this particular topic is going to be data heavy. We want to make sure maybe we take some breaks here and there and not wait 45 minutes. So if at some point Bethany or Francesco feel they've reached a point to take some questions, we will actually take a break, ask a few questions and just move on. So be ready for that. If you have a pressing question, just make sure it's obvious to us. We can address that. Today, we're going to be discussing the state of service design in the US in 2022. We have talked about this last June and shared the preliminary findings. So first of all, thank you for the hundreds of designers in the US who have shared their job functions, where they work, how they work, their priorities, their concerns, the challenges. It's been really very insightful. This is the first of this survey that's happening in the US. So this is very important for us to get a baseline for our next future engagement. We do such with our partners. Talking of which, I wanted to definitely thank our partners in this. So obviously, Service Design Network, North America, all the chapters, as well as our partners, Frog, who have done the heavy lifting of the survey and the analysis and synthesizes, as well as our education partner, SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design, who's been helping us with this effort as well. We hope you're going to get a lot of value out of this state of service design in the US. For the past several years, we've heard that service design was probably like a lesser priority in North America versus Europe and Asia. We may have been wrong thinking that, so we're going to go through this today. Today, you're going to find out some pretty interesting insights. For example, where is service design being practiced the most in the US? Now, what states is the most service design? But also which verticals, which industries and company sizes are service designers evolving to? What are the main skill sets for service designers in the US? And also how mature is service design practice in the US? Far more mature than we thought originally, actually. And eventually, why become or stay service designers in the US in 2020? So those are going to be very interesting questions for you to find out today. And I want to introduce our speakers. So today we'll have Bethany Brown from Frog in California, as well as Francesco from Frog as well in New York. And they will go through all the data inside that we've been collecting and aggregating over the past several months and share those with you. And if you are ready, I'm going to pass down the mic to Bethany for a quick intro.
Hello, everyone. Lovely to meet you all. As Greg flashed up there, I'm Bethany. I'm Bethany Brown, based in San Francisco, Associate Director of Service Design, and working with Frog, and super excited to share some of these insights with you. Francesco, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Thank you, everyone, for joining this call. I'm joining you from New York, and I'm also an associate director of Frog. I'm Italian, so if you spot an accent while I speak to the slide, that's why. And yeah, very happy to be on this call and share our insight. I also wanted to give a shout out to the Service Design Network community in New York that I'm also part of, and I know that there's like a big representation from them to this call. So just like hi to the people from New York. And that's it. I think we can start sharing our content. I will be sharing my screen, so you'll see a presentation come up very soon.
Thanks, Francesco.
All right. Can you all see a keynote?
Yes, I can see it.
Awesome.
Thanks, Francesco. Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. Sorry we can't all be in person and be doing this event with you all together and geeking out on all this data together. But welcome to the State of Service Design in the US. You can go to the next slide. So yeah, Francesco and I are gonna break this up a bit and jump in and out together. But altogether, it's about 50 minutes long of kind of sharing some of these insights with you. And kindly, SDN is hosting and going to be monitoring the chat as well. So we'll get all those questions gathered and find some of those breakpoints where we can as well. Awesome. So here are some of the contributors to the report itself and people that have hosted interviews and synthesized a lot of this rich data as well. Francesco and I, of course, are going to be delivering the bulk of this with you, but just wanted to show some of the faces that have been very deep in the weeds. Awesome. So a little bit in the study background. Our main goals in really running this survey was really to track the growth of service design in the US and really capture the data that helps us assess what the state of it is today in the US. So we're super excited to dive into some of those details with you today and explore some of those findings. So a few of the methods that helped us really craft the report. We first crafted a survey that helped us reach over 350 responses of US-based service designers across 18 industries and 30 states. We interviewed 10 service design thought leaders from public and private sector and academia. We also conducted some secondary research, looking closely at the trends that we really could find from academia, social media, and pieces of other service design writing existing. And then, of course, we worked really closely with SDN and SCAD as partners throughout to really help launch the survey and ensure that the data was really being collected from a wide spread of audiences across the US. So again, thank you so much for your partnership. And then with all of that data, we've concluded a few things. Firstly, there's really never been a better time to be a service designer in the US. And you'll hear more in a minute about how it's maturing and expanding its reach. We also learned that there still aren't enough universities really providing service design formal education to really fulfill the needs in industry. And many service design roles are really being fulfilled by design strategists and designers from other disciplines, and even experienced consultants. So service design really still needs to have its scalability within organizations. And so we'll explore some more of those numbers in a second, but wanted to give you a quick glimpse up front on some of what you see. So now we'll dive a bit into some numbers and really look into some of those demographics to start with. So the majority of our professionals are between the ages of 25 and 44 years old, with the largest percent being between 25 and 34. Not surprising because of service design's infancy. Though the majority of professionals are around 57% practicing service design are women, we see a significant switch in this trend once the professionals reach the management level and where it's majority of men, and majority of that is managers and directors and vice presidents positions. The highest proportion of professionals identify as white or Caucasian, similarly to what we see across many other design disciplines. So again, service design could really use better representation from Black and Indigenous and people of color This is so important when we think about creating equitable services, especially in government and public sector. And then location. So you see a bit of the color kind of sparking up across the US here. We really see the highest percentage practicing service design out of New York at 18%, with a close second, with California being 17.77%, almost 18%, and Georgia at almost 13%. Impressively, 30 out of the 50 states were actually represented in the survey. While New York and California seem like obvious homes for service designers, it's really brilliant to see such a high number of service designers residing in Georgia, Savannah, with Georgia being the home of the only formal service design degree in the US at SCAD, which is really great. So if you want to get on the map more in the US, start a university program. Texas is an interesting addition as well. You can go back this slide. Interesting addition as well, with a good representation of financial services and more recently tech companies setting up shop in that state. Illinois is also a traditional home for service designers in the US, with agencies such as IA Collaborative based out of Chicago as well. And then we'll go into the seniority slide here. Thank you, Francesco. Seniority is mostly senior/lead, but have less than 5 years of experience. The highest proportion is 38% of professionals at the kind of mid and senior levels, followed by leads at 15% and directors at almost 13%. And this aligns with the job market, as a senior service designer role really forms the core of the service design team. It also makes sense within the context of the need for companies to have experienced designers who can really start and hit the ground running with really producing that consistent work, a trend we see within other design disciplines as well. The highest portion of professionals is 41%, who have around 3 to 5 years of experience, followed by 6 to 10 years of experience at around 27.68%. This is not surprising, because service design is a relatively new discipline in the United States, with one of the first service design courses actually coming out of the scene in 2004, Designing for Service Studio course by Shelley Evanson at Carnegie Mellon University. And so I'm going to pass the mic over to Francesco, who's going to share a bit more about the role of service designers.
Awesome. Thank you, Bethany. Okay, so we'll talk here about the role of service designers, and some of the topics that we'll touch upon in this part of the presentation will be the type of organizations that are hiring service designers, what are service designers doing in these organizations, what are their skill set, their outcomes, and so on. And what titles are service designers using as they work within these organizations, which is a very interesting topic. I think a lot of the practitioners will be reflecting themselves into. Okay, so let's start from this. So the type of companies that are hiring service designers and building service design teams. So we found that the highest portion of practitioners works in-house within the private sector. So that's about 40%. And then the next highest portion are working within agencies and consultancies. If we look at the size of the companies, this chart is very interesting, because we can see how the vast majority of service designers either works in very large companies, so companies that's over 5,000 employees, or kind of like smaller companies, or I guess, small design boutique agencies, with 1 to 99 employees. So there's almost like a gap between the very large companies and the smaller companies. Also, another interesting data point to add to this one is that those that work at smaller companies felt their organization had higher level of maturity, and also they seemed ranking a little bit higher in terms of satisfaction and happiness with their role. So this is a very interesting detail there. Then if we look at the industries, the top industries, so we can see how, of course, technology, financial services, healthcare, government, social innovation / nonprofit rank at the top of this list. So these are, probably we can think about these as, the largest companies that are employing service designers as well. And the people that we that answered our survey that are working within these sectors have actually noted how they're working within teams that are sometimes larger than 10 people. So, this is like a very interesting data point. And I guess like we could also interpret this data based on just kind of like the proportion of the organization, because, the larger the company, the larger the team. And so the larger the service design team as well. Moving forward from here, so we have captured this quote from Chris Risden, a design program director at IBM, which we interviewed. I'm not sure if he's on the call, but he said, service design wouldn't have been able to be established in the US without technology. This, I think, is a very interesting and unique perspective to the US market when it comes to service design. And I think that, the way I've been interpreting this one is with two different perspectives. So we could think about, the overall digital transformation that a lot of companies are going through. So if we think about, for example, government or healthcare, service designers are definitely like, they're helping, creating digital touch points within the customer journeys. But the other perspective that I think is very unique to the US market is if we think about the big tech companies. So they have been using service design to really iterate on the products that they have put out there on the market and address the gaps in the experience of their offer. One thing that we learned from our qual interviews is that the people that are working as service design in technology, they sometimes, they claim that service design there is mostly led by product, specifically by product design. And so this is causing a little bit of frustration because, of course, product design, we know moves at a different pace and it's kind of measured against different KPIs. And so we have talked to our interviews participants, and we have unpacked a little bit of this, but this was kind of like the main point that came across. And so it sounds like, although on one side, technology is the largest employer of service design in the US, there is still some work that needs to be done in order to align service design with product design and technology to get to the best outcomes possible. I'm going to move forward to the next slide here and talk about how many professionals are practicing service design within their companies. So I think that this is a pretty reassuring slide, and we can see here some data that gives us hope in the fact that service design is growing in the US, and it's definitely there. And the majority of the professionals that answer the survey have other service designers to rely on in their companies. So this is great. And it's also reassuring to find that most service designers are not working solo within these organizations, because I'm sure that with the practitioners out there, for those who have experienced that type of setup, it's not always easy to have an impact as the only service designer in the team. It's also a sign of just the overall growing maturity of the organization in thinking about service design as as a potential team within their company. In fact, we see that about half of the professional are part of a service design team, so a team that's actually made of service designers. And these teams are made for the majority of more than 2 members. So overall, just a very reassuring and positive slide here. But now let's look at a more interesting data point. So where within companies professionals are practicing service design. So the majority of service design practitioners are actually using service design tools under other classifications. So, the most common ones are, of course, design strategy, user experience design, user research, product management, marketing, and then there's a whole bunch of other titles that we are not showcasing here in this particular slide. So this kind of like speaks to the dilution of the practice within other design practices. And Bethany will talk more about this in the next slides. But if we think about, if we look at this data from the perspective of the years of experience that our responders have, we can see that the ones that have been practicing service design, or claim that have been practicing service design for a longer period of time, so let's say 10 to 20 years, they actually tend to sit within strategy teams, versus those that have been applying service design within service design teams are part of younger teams that have been there for like 0 to 5 years. So this is a result of probably the growing familiarity of those entering the service design workforce, to kind of enter a company with a service design title. It also relates to the smaller number of senior roles specifically to service design. So the survey shows that as people move along in their career, they tend to sit within roles like head of experience, head of design, or head of strategy. And so, it's interesting to see how we have more service designers, maybe at like a senior, junior, and lead role. And then as they move along into higher roles, the service word tends to drop from their title. And then if we look at how often professionals apply service design within their role, so we can see here that 41% is able to dedicate themselves to service design 100% of the time. And then we have, from there, we have the rest of the chart that, kind of like leave space to other type of tools, I guess, and practices. So, the way to relate this chart to the one on the left, I think kind of gets us to a very interesting read of this, because if we think about, for example, people within strategy or user experience, they are the ones that are most likely not able to apply service design tools for most of their time. So, for example, only 34%, and sorry if I'm looking down, I have some more data here to give more color to what we see here on the slide. But we have 34% of strategists and only 20% of UX and product designers who are able to be service designers 100% of their time. And so that's obviously something else in their job that's keeping them busy. But if we think about service designers specifically, we have 60% of them who are quote unquote able to do service design 100% of the time. We also cross this data with what type of organizations these respondents are working in, meaning in-house versus agencies and consultancies. And we haven't noticed a lot of difference in there in terms of how much time they dedicate to service design. So I guess that one way to draw conclusions here is that being able to be a service designer, it's probably less related to the type of industry or the type of sector or the type of company that you work in, but it's a lot more related to the maturity and the readiness of the organization in recognizing the discipline. And one way of recognizing the discipline is to have a service design team and call it like it is. These are service designers and they're part of our service designer team. And we've also seen in relation to this data how people that operate under a service design title, they tend to be more satisfied with their role. And so this speaks again to maturity of organization and also just being able to do what we do best. So moving forward here, so the next data point is about the focus of service design work. So we can see from the chart on the left that 77% of our respondents consult on multiple products and services, and then 11% are dedicated only to one product or service touch point. So this speaks to essentially the two types of strategies that companies can use to apply service design within their organization. And so some companies will use more of a top-down strategy where leadership is the main driver of service design adoption. And so a lot of times what happens in these companies, you will have maybe you will bring in an external consultant or an agency to sort of try to build that bridge between the silos of the organization. But on the other side, another strategy is more of a bottom-up strategy where organizations are able to create center of excellence, where they essentially create capabilities within these silos. And so the way to read this data, it's also really kind of like depending on, again, the readiness of the organization and the level of maturity they have. We have also uncovered how the people in that 77% there, who consult on multiple products or services, might be a little bit less satisfied with their roles, because again, maybe like a top-down approach, is kind of like it gets a little bit more challenging when it comes to implementation within the organization. If we look at deliverables specifically, so we can see, I guess, not too many surprises there. So we can see customer journey maps, service blueprints, insight research, presentation process maps being at the top of the list. But again, one other data point that we crossed this one with was the different classification of the people that responded. So the different titles that they have. So if I am a strategist, if I am a user experience designer, a product designer, what are the most common deliverables for myself? And so we have seen that service designers and strategists actually are pretty aligned in terms of deliverables. So they will both focus on blueprints, let's say, in customer journey maps. But if we start looking and isolating, for example, interaction designers, we see a higher focus on user stories. Marketing will focus more on behavioral archetypes. Product managers will focus on roadmaps, and researchers, of course, will focus on the insight research presentation. So this shows that the outputs are skewed based on the type of role that you have, obviously. And related to this last slide, we have here a breakdown of the skill set. So we have hard skill and soft skills. So in the top rated hard skills will be, again, journey mapping, workshop facilitation, ideation, and service blueprint. Again, let's look at this from the perspective of what classification am I working under? Am I called a service designer? Am I called a strategist, or what else? So again, we see here a very close alignment between service design and strategists. So they share a focus on service blueprint and journey mapping. But again, if we look at interaction designers, for example, the focus will be more on prototypes. And, again, researchers on evaluative research, product managers on product strategy, and marketing on design principles. So there is always a skew based on your particular classification. There will always be a skew of what your focus and your main deliverable is going to be. And if we look at the soft skills on the other side, an interesting data point that we have crossed this one with was the different levels. So am I a senior? Am I a junior? Am I a VP? And how does that change? So we can see how on a general level, collaboration, strategic thinking, empathy, communication, they all rank very high. The interesting thing that came up by cross-referencing this with the different level is that they rank consistently high across levels. So this kind of supports our qual insight that demonstrate how service designers are most effective when acting as a bridge between departments and uncovering, where customers are not satisfied. And so this is true at all levels. These are all skills that you will need as you move along with your career as a service designer. And then, of course, there will be other skills that will climb this chart as you move forward, like things like persuasion, leadership, diplomacy. But it's fair to assume that these skills are gained with longer experience and larger responsibilities and so on. So this is kind of like I guess true for probably any design role. I want to pause here to see if there is any outstanding question that we want to take from the chat before we move forward. Sorry, I lost track a little.
Just keep going. It's fine.
Okay.
We have tons of questions.
All right. It's hard to pick. Okay. I think that this one will spark a lot of questions and debate. I'm really interested in seeing what people have to say. So as you might have noticed in the way I presented the data before, I was saying a lot how service design and design strategy are more closely aligned than maybe, you know, service designers and other service designers working in product design or like marketing or UX and so on. So we wanted to dedicate some more in-depth thoughts around the overlap between these two different roles. You know, starting from the fact that I think everyone would agree about the fact that with the rise of service businesses, you know, business strategies has also added a customer-centric lens and, you know, design thinking to their toolkits of, you know, financial modeling, revenue forecasting, and so on. So this shift in perspective has started a lot of times a long time before, you know, service design could be formalized as a discipline within organizations. And so, like, for example, even if we look at the responders of the level of experience of our responders, we can see how people working in strategy, they say that they have been applying service design tools for, you know, a longer time than, you know, people operating under a service design title. And so this, I guess, just proves how strategy, you know, business strategy has just been around for longer, and it's kind of like found in service design one path of evolution, I guess, which in many cases has just moved faster than what a company could introduce service design within their org chart. So let's also think about the fact that strategies among our responders are in most cases self-taught. They have gained their service design knowledge through work experience or you know, or through continuing education and things like that. So some of them also is interesting. They have gained service design experience through some design courses that sort of like merge strategy and service design together, demonstrating how, you know, there's a lot of synergy between these two roles for sure. So we have like, I pulled together some of these courses names. So we have, of course, design strategy, we have design management, transdisciplinary design, integrated design, business design. So all of these sort of demonstrate how schools are kind of, you know, merging these two disciplines together because of, you know, affinity and synergy of work and scope. But you know, we think that there's obviously like a distinction between the two. Otherwise, you know, we wouldn't use two different terms. And you know, if we think even about the time that strategies have to dedicate to service design, that's obviously lower in our data. Only 34% of them can focus on service design 100% of the time. So there is something else that's keeping them busy. I think we could all agree that service design and strategy share similar tools when it comes to define the service opportunities. And so, you know, the journey maps, you know, the design principle, research tools, all of this, you know, outputs and deliverables that we had seen in the previous slides, you know, they both strategists and service designers use them. But these tools, you know, we have to think about the fact they contribute, you know, to build synergy between the front of the stage and the back of the stage of the service. And so, you know, we need to make sure that these services are, you know, resonate with the people's needs. But on the other side, we need to make sure that an organization is able to operationalize, launch, and sustain the services. And so I think that, you know, this is kind of like where the distinction comes into play. The difference really lies in the fact that strategy will focus on maximizing the business potential of a service, you know, including positioning, cost efficiency, revenues, and all of that. While service design will shape the experience and create, you know, the touch point and orchestrate the touch points that manifest in front of the user, and like test these touch points with them, and you know, and iterate on them. So these two lenses are very deeply connected, and they share a lot of thinking and a lot of tools. They're equally user-centric, but they're at the same time they're different. So customer satisfaction definitely means, business success. And so we all know that services need to be feasible, viable, and desirable. And both strategy and service design contribute to make this happen. Just want to get a pulse check from the chat again to see if there is any outstanding question regarding this particular topic, or we can also all just take them at the end.
We take them at the end, Francisco.
Awesome. Okay, I'll move forward. All right, so switching gears here, service design in education. So how do service design get educated about service design? And I briefly touched about this before. So we can see how most service design professionals have, our responders are very highly educated. They have a master's degree and they have a 4-year degree. But at the same time, if we look at the education method, we still have people still learn about service design through professional experience, or they're self-taught, or there's some sort of continuing education course that they're following. So what this means is that service design doesn't seem to be a starting point, for professionals here in the US. It's almost, like an evolution of either your path in education or your path in your career. And we have learned that a lot of people still learn about this through books, blogs, or other methods. And I'm sure that a lot of people that are listening into this call can, reflect themselves into this particular data. I mean, me, myself, I started in industrial design and then I went into service design. So there's also some sort of point in our career where we learn about service design and, there's that light bulb that that's like, oh, this is actually an occupation. I can do this. I can learn more about this. And so this is an interesting one. So, we have pulled out some names of backgrounds and fields that our participants studied. So on the left side, I guess we have fields that align mostly with, what everyone's expecting. So, design, industrial design, service design, which, it's only 10%, human-computer interaction, and graphic design. And then on the other side, there's 44% of participants that are coming from the most different backgrounds, and some of them kind of align with design. If you think, for example, about psychology or behavioral science, of course, they all contribute to design. But we also have things like mathematics, journalism, philosophy, religion. So it sounds like service design is still something, like I said before, that people just kind of bump into, and it can make more or less sense compared to where I'm coming from. Because of course, if I'm coming from human-computer interaction, it makes more of a logical shift to go into service design. But what if I'm coming from mathematics or film or anthropology? So it's really interesting. There's really a very vast range of background that people that responded to our survey came from. So this gets us to this statement: service design needs more formal education programs in the US. So this study has been conducted with SCAD, like we mentioned at the beginning of the call. And SCAD so far is the only university in the US that has formal service design courses. And they can simply not graduate people fast enough to meet the market needs. In fact, we heard from one of our partners at SCAD, Mauricio. I don't know if it's on the call, but he said that 99% of graduates from SCAD were hired within a year of concluding their studies. And so it's reassuring to see that there are roles out there that are available for service designers. But at the same time, we definitely need more formal education, because as we have more formal education and we start from schools to talk about service design, then this will kind of fall through all the other touch points that we have. We start from the schools, we go into the companies, and then from the companies we go into the clients, and then we need to start planting a seed of service design somewhere to let the community grow. I've been talking long enough, so I am gonna hand it over to Bethany again to talk about the impact of service design.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Francesco. I feel like I could listen to you talk for much longer. We only have 15 minutes to go here and a little bit more to get through. So yeah, I'm gonna transition us into a little bit of the impact of service design and take us through some of those bits and pieces. All right, so service designers' impact on organizations. Service designers report that their main function and impact within an organization is really to increase the user centricity of the organization, improve customer satisfaction, and also increase engagement. As companies focus on being more customer-centric, a service design team can really be the key driver in ensuring customer success and retention. Education of its value is also important to ensure the organizational success, as many in the US market are aware of what the discipline can really offer. At present, the majority of 77% of service designers in-house and in agencies consult on multiple products and services, as it's really proven that they're most effective when really acting as that bridge, giving them the unique perspective to really uncover where customers are not satisfied and also recommending those solutions. This is promising as it's really proven to set service designers up for success organizationally. And then we'll take you into a little bit of a quote here from one of our interviewees. People at the city talk about including people with lived experiences at the decision-making table. So I want to unpack this a little bit with more of our data here. So service design can really help organizations be user-centered and find the gaps in their current offerings and processes to really apply that bottom-up approach. Service designers tend to bridge across multiple channels and products and services, giving them the unique perspective to really uncover areas of the business where customers are not satisfied. They're most successful when they can really zoom out at that micro level, creating and mapping comprehensive understandings of overall organizations, allowing them to really connect the dots and standardizing what a good service delivery should really look like across organizations, while then also being able to kind of zoom back in and are able to then follow through with those recommendations and ensure the vision is truly brought to life. This poises them to really offer a perspective of more for more siloed teams to ensure a more seamless experience for users, acting as through lines between teams and groups to ensure a seamless service experience for customers. This understanding also makes them extremely effective at providing recommendations for new products and services by responding to implicit user needs while considering the business's needs and their desire to scale. The largest barrier we see is the need to balance being cross-functional entity and keeping an eye on identifying those opportunities while also adding value to individual stakeholders and teams. Just to unpack this a little bit more, service designers make some of their biggest impact by strategically leading teams to collaborate regularly and then reduce that redundancy. As service designers have an opportunity to bring cross-functional alignment within an organization, they should also focus on finding key stakeholders and allies, such as product managers, to really help them shape the roadmaps and define their priorities. Individuals and individual business units are often incentivized to kind of ship products rather than actually working together. This is a challenge for service designers because it really makes it difficult for them to work across organizational silos and follow a service through all the way to implementation. To overcome organizational hurdles in implementing service design initiatives, service designers really need to move out of individual business units and really have that equal seat at the table, similar to business and technology as well. I want to take us into some more juicy stats here. So service design maturity, the highest portion of professionals are really working at companies of over 5,000 employees. So not too surprising. That's 49%, with the second highest at smaller companies of 1 to 99 employees at 24%. Professionals at smaller companies feel their organization had a higher level of maturity around service design. Along with their higher maturity, there also tends to be those at smaller companies who tend to be more satisfied in their role as well. So though those results are not statistically significant, it could be that smaller firms may be more able to be more service design focused in say agencies, or that sort of service designer who can really make a larger impact in that kind of smaller space. So I'm going to take us into this statement here. Service design is diluted, or maybe it's hidden. We learned in qualitative research that service design is often associated with a set of tools and processes that can often be borrowed by other disciplines through this kind of plug and play approach. Journey maps, storyboards, experience principles, etc., all those points. This perspective can really dilute the practice and relegate it to more of a mindset rather than a standalone discipline. There are similarities that can be drawn with design thinking, which has incorporated its multiple job descriptions within and outside of the design roles. As a result, some organizations don't isolate service design as a standalone discipline, and many service designers kind of sit within other teams such as UX and research strategy, integrating their tools and their processes there. What contributed to reducing service design to kind of a toolbox is certainly its multidisciplinary approach. 30% of our respondents gained service design experience through professional experience, and 16% through continued education, and 13% received that formal service design education. So this means the majority of service designers have really been looking at the discipline as an amplification of their skill sets, and they still apply service design tools within other practices. So I want to go back to this graph and kind of talk a little bit more here as well. So what we're learning from this insight is that service design should really be considered as a standalone practice, as Francesco touched on as well. Those who work in service design teams consider their organization much more mature than service designers who work within strategy or within UX. The data also shows that service designers are actually much happier in standalone discipline roles than being embedded within other teams. To add to this, those that work in larger teams of more than 10 people report a higher maturity score against smaller teams of 3 to 5. So compared to design thinking, service design is not just a mindset or an approach, but it is a profession and it is a practice, and it comes with its own set of deliverables. A user-centered approach must be shared across disciplines to get alignment on goals and priorities. But like in every team, everyone should really own a different piece. When it comes to service design, the superpower is really providing that conduit between user needs and experience and touch points. The goal of organizations should really be to set up a strong practice within their organization, not to adopt service design mindset across teams and disciplines, which does run that risk of service design initiatives kind of falling through the cracks. So I want to end on this note here. Organizations with that dedicated team of service designers really show that higher level of maturity. There are certainly overlaps with service design, business design, interaction design, etc. But they all need to work in synergy to really generate the best outcomes together. Being generalists allows designers to really focus all their efforts towards like one systemic solution. But are we required to do it all? Service design deliverables, like a service blueprint, come with their own complexities, and they really require a team of experts, just like creating a library of digital components or financial model. Wearing different hats and having a shared understanding of how different aspects of a project interconnect is a must. Design disciplines don't work in silos, but we all have superpowers. Not even service designers can be experts at all things service design can do. Organizations who do have a dedicated team of service designers really do show that higher level of maturity. Right. I see lots of amazing questions here. I do want us to wrap up with a few more slides here. So I'm going to pass it over to Francesco, and then I'm going to take a read through the chat as well.
I think we are ready to start taking questions. I don't know if...
Yeah, we can start. So Brenda, do you want to start? We have hundreds of questions, so obviously not going to be going through all of them. So Brenda, do you have a first question for our speakers?
Yes, thank you. This is going to be related to the survey. And Ashley Cook asked, how was the survey population sampled and how representative is the sample that responded?
Bethany, you want to say?
Yeah, I can take that. Francesco, feel free to chime in as well with any additional data here. The samples came from across 30 states in the US. But we did have some respondents from outside of the US, but we really tried to keep that data specific to the US. And they did come from a wide spread of industries. I think it was 13 or 18 industries. Let me double check that information. Francesco, do you have anything else to add as well? It was sent out.
Yeah, just so this is the first time we do this, it's a snapshot of what Switzerland looks like in the US today. Our goal is to do this every year to see a progression, evolution that will be obviously. We hope to actually start having some strong patterns by next year, in 2 years, 3 years. And we hope to evolve the survey to have more input and more data to share with you as we progress through.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Beth, how many answers did we get total?
We got over 350 respondents and answers across the board. And the way that was sent out was via various social media posts. And I know SDN did their part in emailing out, and so did SCAD as well, and Frog as well. So as much as we could reach, we tried.
Robin, do you have a question, or Brandon?
Oh man, there's some good ones. Let's see. I think Emily asked, Bethany, it was said that the survey recruited people who may have a different job title, but still consider themselves service designers. Would love to know the most common job titles the respondents had other than service designers. Now, you probably can't pull that out of your head, but do you have any kind of semblance of, did we ask what that other was?
I think I can cover this one. So yeah, I think that the most common one after service design was design strategist. And then after that, it was probably user experience and product designer.
That's what I would guess, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Robin, you got one?
Maybe just a follow up on that. And if we don't have it, that's fine. But it was a question for Francesco from Leah, asking what the denominator for the percentages presented by industry was.
The denominator of the different titles?
Leah, if you're on the call, if you want to clarify what your question was specifically so we'll get it right.
Which I can unmute them.
It's Leah Tizio.
Hold on, I'm getting there. It's alphabetical and a lot of people in here. JK.
I guess like one thing that I could add, I don't know if that answers the question, is that you know, the most of the people that are working with a service design title, they were mostly coming from larger organizations. So the ones that we mentioned, like, were 5,000 people beyond. And again, like the various, like the smaller, I guess, like organization from 1 to 99 people. And so in between, you know, this two, there was a lot of dilution of the discipline, like Bethany mentioned before. I don't know if this is getting at what Leah is asking, but
maybe she can comment in the chat.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I
answered like she covered.
Okay. Sorry, I wasn't able to get to you quickly enough. Try harder next time. What's our next question there? Is that Mar?
I have one.
Go for it.
It's from Mar Ramirez. Do you have some examples of social innovation companies hiring service designers?
So I think that, like, this is a very interesting question, because we have tried to isolate the data coming from government and social innovation. And one thing that we have learned is that a lot of the people that check that box, like I'm working as a service designer for government and social innovation, are mostly coming from agencies and consultancies. So a lot of time there isn't like a service design team within, a government organization or, or a specific social innovation organization, but they tend to bring in, consultancies. And I think this kind of like speaks to one of the big difference that I think is in service design in the US versus in Europe, for example. There's a lot more, like if you think, for example, at the UK government, right? There's a lot more, participation of service design within the organization there to push forward the kind of, public services. And this is, of course, like a little bit different here in the US. It seems like there's still some work that needs to be done to implement service designers in government.
Brendan, you have a question?
Yeah, I think the next one here is from David. It's for Bethany or et al. Is there any information on the financial impact of service design on firms or industries? For example, what are the corporate level KPIs for service design? Is that anything that we captured in this particular study?
We didn't necessarily capture this in the data in the survey. There was some things that came up during our qual research. And so, I think that one of the most kind of like, I guess, more negative perspectives that we got around this is that a lot of the leadership sometimes still thinks about service design as like something that is hard to measure. And so, if we're talking about like KPI specifically, and that is why, in one of the slides before, we mentioned how service design tends to be led by product, because, product, of course, like, it's immediately, measurable, through like user testing or, sprint designs and all of that. And for service, of course, like we're kind of like operating at a different level. And so, we have done a lot of debating when we were putting together this report, like what could be the KPIs, that we hold service design work to. And, it's definitely something that would have to be measured again, like on a different level, because, we all know that service design is measurable. There is like NPS score, customer satisfaction, there's data that we collect at every touch point, but we have to be ready and like mature enough to pull that data together and be able to look at it in the perspective of a service and find like where are the gaps, and not look at the perspective of the particular feature, and so there's definitely kind of a big thing there that needs to be unpacked.
Fantastic. And a couple of questions I think have been addressed in chat. Joseph asked if the data is available for us to play with and pull, and how will it be released, I think. So some of that's being addressed in chat. So look there for some of those answers. Some other questions that we've got here.
Yeah, so the full report will be available in a few weeks through the Frog office, and we will try to get it sent to the Meetup link or the LinkedIn. We'll get it to you in a way or another.
Absolutely. Amy asks, what are some best practices for getting non-design folks to get up to speed on service design benefits? This is kind of a general question, right, for service design at large. It's not specific, I think, to our talk, but are there show and tells? So really quick, service design experts, what's the one thing you recommend for getting non-design folks up to speed on the benefits of service design in general?
Well, I think that, I think for anyone that's practicing design under any classification, it's probably going to be easy to understand what the benefits of the discipline is. I think it's really about practicing it and like really being able, like Bethany mentioned before, to kind of like zoom out a little bit and like get to a kind of like a service level perspective. and being able to look at the big picture at all like the touch points that are making a service come to life. And a lot of the tools that we, the service design uses, like, customer journey maps or like service blueprints, they are tools that I guess like the whole design community, regardless of where you're working at, it's kind of getting familiar with. I think to me, what's more interesting is like getting an understanding of the approach and like the right level of thinking that service design has compared to other disciplines potentially. And you can do that within your own organization. You can try to you can get educated about it, read about it, and try to push that thinking within your organization. And I'm sure that will improve outcomes of anything you'll be working on.
Yeah, I agree with that. Lots of sharing case studies, share examples, and creating kind of meetups and groups where you talk about and share kind of how it's made an impact organizationally, I think is really powerful too.
So Francesca, I think you had a few last notes that you want to share with, because we have a few more minutes now. We can take a few more questions after that. Do you want to share your conclusions maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's
a recap.
The conclusions are, let me share my screen again. So pretty straightforward, I guess, what we kind of like the picture that we're painting here, with this report, like Bethany said before, is that there has never been a better time to be a service designer in the US. So I think that from the data that we have seen, we can see how the practice is getting a lot of recognition across different industries, across different type of companies. And the number of roles for service designers out there has grown exponentially across any sector. And that we can see it even like from the responders, like they came from 30 different states in this country. So, we have also kind of a very nice spread of service designers around the country. Of course, like with the top ones being, New York, California, Georgia, Texas, and so on. But the heads of design and head of products are really increasingly adding service design teams to their portfolio, and we are kind of like running out of service designers that can fill up these roles, because there isn't like enough service designers that are coming out of a service design formal education that can take up these roles. And so as the maturity is growing and as people are getting knowledge about the discipline, on the other side, is the discipline doesn't have the scalability yet to achieve its true impact. Because this is a country of like 330 million people, and there's a lot of services out there. We live in a service economy, and the discipline doesn't have the scalability yet, because if we look at the roles that are out there and the service design practitioners that are out there, they don't have enough years of experience. We have seen like people working under service designers roles are like less than 5 years of experience, and then so they're kind of like entering the workforce right now. And so what happens is that people working under other disciplines like strategists and user experience designers, interaction designers at the top of the list are fulfilling these roles, which I think it's of course like also like a positive thing, because like I said before, everyone within the design industry, regardless of your discipline, should be aware of the potential of service design, should be working with service designers. We kind of like all sort of like speak the same language at some level, but we also need to train more formal. We need more formal service design courses. We only have SCAD right now in the US, and certainly like SCAD cannot be the only institution that's forming service designers. And also what's important is that we need the private and the public sector to start partnering with this organization and create training programs for service designers to join. And, you know, we need to talk with students about this as a potential occupation, you know, because a lot of people, you know, we do some mentorship programs at Frog, and you know, sometimes, you know, a lot of the students don't even know that service design is a path, and you know, just kind of like creating that awareness. It's really, really important, I think, to push the conversation forward. And you know, so I guess conclusion in one line is that it's a very great moment to get into the discipline, and you know, we certainly need to grow the community. And you know, I know that, you know, SDN and like the people in this call as well have been doing their part in doing so, but we need to be able to reach that scalability. So you know, conclusions are pretty you know, short and sweet, but yeah, we'll again happy to take any other question that our participants may have around any of the topics that we covered. The titles, for example, I would love to hear, you know, if anyone wants to, you know, give us their experience, for example, of becoming a service designer, coming from another, you know, background, or even practicing service design within a classification that is not service design. You're not called a service designer, but you consider yourself a service designer. A lot of people that responded to the survey matched this profile. So I would say that if we could generalize what's happening today in the US is that service design is there, but is kind of like attached to other disciplines in most cases. And I'm sure that it's true for a lot of the people on this call. Kind of stop sharing and we can get back at getting some questions. Anything from?
I don't think we have any more questions that we haven't really covered that are directly applicable to the survey.
We can go beyond. We can go beyond the survey.
We've got a sharp drop off. Usually, you know, we've lost about 100 people so far, so we appreciate you guys hanging out with us, going to the wire here. The outstanding questions that we've got are a little bit more in general about service design education, internships, and the like. I guess one that was a little more specific to the study itself was from Phil, and Phil asked, when you referred to service design maturity, how did that compare to other areas of organizational maturity, design or otherwise? I don't think we have that data, but can you speak to that at all in any shape?
Yeah, and Bethany, feel free to chime in. But so the way we evaluated maturity, so within the survey, it was a scale. So it was a scale from 1 to 10. We didn't compare, you know, maturity of service design with maturity of other design disciplines. But I think it's been very interesting to just kind of like cross-reference maturity with almost kind of like all of the data points that we had there. So, you know, if we think about, I don't know, like a couple of crossover that come to mind is, you know, we think about sectors, right? So technology, healthcare, and, you know, government and so on. So technology, again, like is the biggest employer of service design. At the same time, you know, the one that's between this top 5 ranking lower in terms of maturity. So that was an interesting one. In-house versus, I don't believe if we've done that crossover, to be honest, but it just came to my mind, like it'd be interesting to learn about it. It was more about the happiness of service design, I think I wanted to refer to. So we have seen how service design tend to rank more happy and satisfied with their roles. Again, when they're focused on one specific product or touch point, and also when they're working in smaller organization. Now, we can interpret that data point in, all the possible way that we can. I guess, the first thing that will come to mind is that as service designer, operate at the best when they are trying to build connection between, departments and between different, parts of the services. Being in a larger organization would definitely have like larger challenges because, a lot of these organizations will have, different departments that operate in silos. So trying to build that bridge, it's something that's maybe more challenging, and that's why they claim to be less maybe satisfied. Yeah, these are just a couple of data points that came to mind. I don't know, Bethany, if you have anything to add to that.
No, I was going to just say something similar. Yeah, we didn't do a comparison to how maturity compares across the board. It wasn't a scale that we kind of created in the questions that we were asking kind of specifically service designers to find out their maturity scale in the US. And yeah, as Francesco mentioned, it was interesting for us to kind of cross-analyze that with the happiness scale and size of company scale and those types of things. So yeah.
Bethany, do you want to tell us why we have chosen to not include a salary survey within this survey?
I think there actually are salary surveys that exist. And yeah, I think we just more wanted to identify generally the state of service design itself in this survey, rather than kind of hunting down salary information. But there's some great information out there, I believe. SDN actually partnered with one recently that was specifically a salary survey, I think. Yeah,
which is more comparing salaries, between US and different countries.
Exactly. Yeah.
There was a question earlier about, knowing what you know now, do you wish you had asked different questions or more questions around some topics that came through, or kind of like give us a bit of a soft touch over some maybe like harder topics for next year, for example?
I thought you were going to say in the beginning, knowing what you know now, do you wish you had taken a different path? I think there's definitely like things that we can expand upon. Again, like thinking, I see actually like one of the questions here that I think it's an interesting point to expand upon. Like, do companies prefer to build like, service design teams in-house, or do they prefer like, going through agencies? Like how is that different? Or even again, like thinking about, service designers working in agencies versus in-house, what is like the happiness related to that? What are some of the challenges that are related to that? I think would be interesting, because a lot of the conclusion that we've drawn from the data, it's, oftentimes coming from, sort of like our interpretation of it and like our own experience. So it could be like a little subjective, but it would be definitely interesting to talk more about these, and maybe, complement this data points with more one-on-one qual interviews.
Yeah, I think now that we have a baseline, we definitely have something to springboard off of and go a lot deeper into some of these points. Like measurement is something that came up a lot, is something people couldn't kind of grapple with as much. And so how do we measure, and how do we measure its impact? And more, I think, is there's far more scales that need to be created, I think, to understand impact for sure.
So I want to be respectful of your time. It's 1:15 now in Dallas. Maybe we can take a couple more questions, if you don't mind, Bethany and Francesco, and just kind of wrap it up, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brendan, do you have a question? Or Brenda?
There are some good ones. I really actually like this one recently from Josef. Aside from the lack of educational offerings for service designers, what are the biggest issues confronting the service design community these days?
Interesting question. I mean, I guess like I don't have a straight up answer to that. Like we could make some assumptions. So there's lack of education, and I think that lack of education actually just creates a lot of other problems. Because like education and awareness about the discipline, it's something that it's so important, because if you're working within an agency, for example, or like a consultancy, and you want to talk about service design with your clients, and clients don't have the lingo, or like don't have the knowledge to do that, it's it can get challenging. And I think that it all starts from education to some extent, because if you think about the way service design is spread, like in Europe, like in North Europe, I think it all started from starting to build formal education for students. And in the same way, there are courses that design courses that focus on user experience design, or like focus on interaction design and graphic design. The more we talk and the more we educate people about the different disciplines, the more those will resonate into our work environments, into the companies that we're working with, and into the clients that we're servicing. And of course, the other thing that I can think of is just getting that buy-in from leadership at an organizational level. I think that's another thing that we talked about in our qual interviews. Sometimes, sometimes leadership is not educated about what service design is, and doesn't know how to implement it within the projects and the teams. And that's definitely a challenge. I don't know if there's anything else that comes to mind, Bethany, when it comes to.
Yeah, I fully agree with all you've added there as well. Yeah, there's so much service design has to do to kind of continue to scale and grow, really. I think this baseline survey really showed how young it is, but also that there are a lot of us, and there are a lot of us really working really hard to make service design real. And I think the biggest finding for me is that it really should be a standalone discipline. And I'm sure all of us here have had experiences of both being involved in a standalone discipline, and then also kind of wearing the different hats as well. And I think it is harder to do it that way and to build that way. So I think, building a practice with our own set of deliverables that has that depth to it, and making sure the excellence of service design really doesn't fall through the cracks, because it's a pretty special field, and I think it really deserves its stage. And I'm excited for that, because I can see that forming more and more across the US, which is awesome to see. It kind of getting to that place that Europe's at as well. So yeah, thanks, Francesco. Any other questions? Maybe one more before we wrap up.
One more question, maybe. I mean, we can do this all day, so we have like.
Yeah, that's actually me, isn't it? Yeah. Let's see. One more question. I was in a different Slack. There's some good ones. One last question. Okay. Antonio asks, what aspect of the study do you wish we knew more about, or was more explored? Greg asked a similar question, but I'd like to interpret that with my own as we end. What data did you see in the study that made you go, oh crap, we needed to ask something deeper or a little bit more? What was there one thing that popped out that you really want to drill down next time?
It's so hard, because I feel like our reaction was more like, oh my goodness, we have so much rich information. And I think we also asked qualitative questions as well, which brought its own kind of set of answers, and we were able to pull from that too. So it's tough.
I think more like then a deeper, like another set of data, like salary, for example. Yes, that could be like another thing that we dig deeper into. I think for me is the crossover of data that needs a little bit more interpretation. Because I think we have like a very good baseline, but sometimes maybe with the type of data that we have right now, it's kind of like hard to get to the right interpretation. And so being able to understand, like if if you're working like in this industry and like this industry like is doesn't show like a high level of maturity in your case, like why is that? So try to kind of like double click into these kind of things. And also I had another thought that just went away. Okay, I'll just stop there.
One of the related questions I think that was related to this was about the comparison between the US and Europe. When we did our initial meeting and we had Birgit on, she could talk a lot about the stats there, but now we have a lot of stats about the US that we didn't have before. So the question was, well, how do these stats measure up against Europe? And what are the demographics? So we talked about the demographics in the US study. But how does that overlay with the standard demographics of the US at large, right? Are they is that what the demographics in the US are? So is it 1-to-1 or is it still predominantly one way versus the other? So I think adding in some of that combinatorial data would be pretty helpful.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for us. So thank you so much for the speakers. Thank you, Bethany. Thank you, Francesco. This is a lot of work and you have a large team behind you to actually just push this survey through and collect the information. So thank you so much. We're looking forward to do this again next year and hopefully have some different answers to you, maybe get a bit of a thicker survey maybe this time. So we've learned some stuff. This recording will be available probably tonight or tomorrow morning on the SDN YouTube channel, which is in several opportunities in the chat room. Thank you for all of you who joined for all over the world. We had people from India and Scotland and Norway to join us. It's lovely, especially since it was about the US only. So it's actually very interesting that you guys care. And thank you again to Bethany, Francesco, Brandon, Brenda, and Christopher for helping us put this together. We're looking forward to see you again next time, and then have a lovely day and stay safe out there.